Snow came down in slow, careful flakes, the kind that seemed to choose where they landed. It softened the hard lines of the prairie town, smoothing ruts in the road and settling gently on the bare branches that framed the little one-room schoolhouse. Smoke rose from chimneys in the distance, thin grey threads drifting toward a pale winter sky, each one promising warmth, voices, and belonging. Inside the schoolhouse, Miss Clara Whitmore stood alone. The children had left minutes ago, but the echo of them lingered, boots thudding, laughter bursting free, the scrape of chairs pushed back too quickly. The chalkboard behind her still bore the last words she had written that morning. "Merry Christmas." She lifted the eraser and wiped it away slowly, white dust clouding the air before settling like frost along the wooden ledge. She took her time. She always did on days like this. The small room looked different without the children. Desks that felt crowded and alive, an hour earlier now, sat stiff and orderly, like they were waiting for instructions that would never come. Paper chains hung crookedly along the windows, red and green links made by uneven little hands. A pine branch she'd brought in from the edge of town was tied with twine to the front post, its needles releasing a faint, clean scent into the cold air. Clara straightened a stack of readers that didn't need straightening. She picked up a mitten left behind, tiny and striped, and folded it carefully before placing it on her desk. Someone would come back for it, she knew. Someone always did. There would be a knock, a flushed face at the door, a mother apologizing with a smile while a child tugged at her skirt. Someone always had someone. She moved to the window and looked out over the whitewashed fields. The road that led out of town disappeared into the snow, bending gently toward homes filled with people preparing for the evening. She imagined tables being set, candles lit, voices calling names she would never hear spoken for her. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, brown hair pinned neatly at her neck, cheeks pink from the cold, eyes tired but kind. She looked every bit the capable schoolteacher the town knew her to be. What they didn't see was how quiet her rented room felt at night, how letters stopped coming years ago, how grief could stretch itself thin and still never quite leave. She turned away from the window and began gathering her things. Her gloves lay folded in her desk drawer, mended at the fingertips so many times the fabric there was almost soft as felt. Her coat hung on the peg by the door, wool thinning at the elbows. She brushed a bit of chalk, dust from her skirt, and wrapped her scarf tight around her throat before shrugging into the coat. Before leaving, she paused, as she always did, and looked once more around the room. "You did good," she murmured, though she wasn't sure if she meant the students or herself. Outside, the cold bit immediately sharp and clean. Snow creaked beneath her boots as she locked the door and slipped the key into her pocket. The schoolhouse stood small and sturdy behind her, its windows dark now, its purpose fulfilled for the year. The town lay quiet, most folks already inside, but the land beyond stretched wide and open, unbothered by the holiday. Clara took a breath, filling her lungs with air that smelled of snow and distant wood smoke. That was when she heard the horse. The sound came low and rhythmic, hooves compressing snow, leather creaking. She turned, half expecting to see one of the farmers riding past on his way home. But the figure that emerged from the grey-white horizon was unmistakable. The horse was tall and dark, broad-chested, moving with the easy confidence of an animal that knew every inch of this land. The man riding him sat straight-backed, long coat pulled close, hat shadowing his face. Ethan Cole. Clara felt her shoulders tense without meaning to. Everyone in town knew Ethan Cole. He owned the largest ranch for miles, land that rolled on seemingly forever, dotted with cattle and barns and bunkhouses. People spoke of his wealth in hushed, respectful tones, but just as often they spoke of his solitude. He rode closer and slowed, bringing the horse to a stop a few yards from her. Snow dusted his coat and clung to the brim of his hat. When he lifted it in greeting, his dark hair was wind-tousled, his expression calm and observant. "Evening, Miss Whitmore," he said. "Good evening, Mr. Cole," she replied, surprised to find her voice steady. He glanced past her at the schoolhouse, then back to her. "School let out for the holiday?" "Yes, until January." She hesitated. then added, "The children were excited." "They usually are," he said, a faint smile touching his mouth. "Christmas does that." Silence stretched between them, not awkward exactly, but weighted. Ethan's eyes moved, taking in details most men overlooked: the worn edge of her coat, the careful way she held herself, the road behind her empty of waiting family. "You got somewhere to be?" he asked at last. The question landed softly and struck hard all the same. Clara swallowed. She had learned to answer questions like that with ease. She could say she was fine, that she had plans, that she preferred quiet. All of it would be true enough on the surface. "I'll manage," she said, offering the familiar smile. Ethan did not smile back. He studied her the way one studies weather, reading signs others ignored. "I reckon you always do," he said. The wind shifted, lifting a strand of her hair loose from its pins. She tucked it back, suddenly aware of how alone she was standing there on the open road. Ethan cleared his throat. "My house is full tonight," he said, as if testing the words. "Hands from the ranch, Cook's family, a few folks who didn't have anywhere else sensible to go. Plenty of noise, plenty of food." She nodded, unsure where this was leading. "But there ain't much heart in it," he went on. "Not unless someone brings it." Clara looked up at him then, really looked. His face was weathered but not hard, lines carved by sun and responsibility rather than cruelty. There was something earnest in his eyes, something careful. "You're welcome to join us," he said. "Just for dinner. No expectations." Her breath caught before she could stop it. The offer was simple, straightforward, and terrifying. "I couldn't impose," she said quickly. "You barely know me." "I know enough," he replied. "I know you stay late at the schoolhouse. I know you never talk about family. And I know Christmas can feel longer than most days." The honesty of it left her momentarily speechless. Snow drifted between them, settling on the fence posts and the horse's mane. "I don't want pity," she said quietly. "I wouldn't offer it," Ethan said. "This isn't charity. It's an invitation." The land seemed to hold its breath. Clara thought of her rented room, of a cold stove and a single plate set on a narrow table. She thought of the children's faces when they'd spoken of home, of how she had smiled and listened and carried the weight of it alone. "Just for dinner," she told herself. "Just one evening of warmth." "All right," she said finally, her voice barely above the wind. "Just for dinner." Ethan nodded once as if sealing a promise. He dismounted smoothly and offered his hand to help her up. She hesitated only a second before taking it. His grip was warm and steady, grounding in a way she hadn't realized she needed. As the horse turned toward the open land and the schoolhouse faded behind them, Clara felt something shift inside her, not hope exactly, but the loosening of a knot she had carried for far too long. Snow continued to fall, gentle and persistent, as they rode toward a house filled with light she had never imagined might be meant for her. The ranch house rose out of the snow like something drawn from a memory Clara didn't know she had. Warm light spilled from every window, gold against the blue-white night, and smoke curled thickly from the chimneys. As Ethan helped her down from the horse, she could hear voices inside, laughter, the scrape of chairs, the clink of dishes. It sounded alive in a way that made her chest ache. For a moment she hesitated on the porch. Her boots were dusted with snow, her gloves worn thin. She suddenly felt like an intruder at the edge of a world that did not belong to her. Ethan noticed. He opened the door wider and stepped aside, not rushing her, not urging. "Just waiting. Come on in, Miss Whitmore," he said gently. "You're freezing." The heat hit her all at once. The smell of pine, roasted meat, bread fresh from the oven. Coats hung thick along the wall, and a long hallway stretched inward, lined with framed photographs, cattle. Wide fields, men on horseback, a younger Ethan standing beside older figures she guessed were his parents. Before she could take more than 2 steps, a woman bustled toward her, cheeks flushed, apron dusted with flour. "You must be the schoolteacher," the woman exclaimed. "I'm Margaret." "Lord Ethan, you didn't say she looked half frozen." "Come here, dear." Clara barely had time to protest before her coat was taken, her scarf unwound, her gloves set aside. Someone pressed a warm mug into her hands, cider, spiced and sweet. The heat seeped into her fingers, into her bones. "Thank you," Clara said, overwhelmed. Children darted past her legs, their laughter high and bright. One little girl stopped short and stared up at her. "Are you the teacher?" the child asked. Clara smiled automatically. "I am." The girl grinned, grabbed her hand without hesitation and tugged. "Come see the tree." The tree stood in the main room, tall and full, decorated with handmade ornaments and strings of popcorn. Candles flickered safely in glass holders, casting soft light over the faces gathered there. Clara felt something loosen in her chest as she looked around. No one stared at her as if she didn't belong. No one asked why she was there. They simply made space. Dinner was called, and she found herself seated at the long table, surrounded by people whose names she barely knew, but who spoke it to her as if she'd always been part of the room. Plates were passed, laughter rose and fell, and stories flowed freely about cattle drives gone wrong, about winter storms survived, about small triumphs that meant everything when life was hard. Clara listened at first, then found herself speaking too. She told a story about a boy in her class who learned to read by sounding out seed catalogs. The table erupted in laughter. Someone reached over and squeezed her arm, warm and familiar. Ethan sat across from her, quieter than the rest, watching. He noticed how her shoulders slowly lowered, how her smile stopped being careful and became real. Every laugh she let loose felt like a small victory. After dinner, the children were ushered toward the tree. Gifts were handed out, simple things, useful things, cherished things. Clara watched from the edge, content to observe, until Margaret pressed a small parcel into her hands. "Oh no," Clara said quickly. "I didn't." "It's Christmas," Margaret replied firmly. "Hush and open it." Inside was a scarf, thick and soft, knitted in deep green wool. "It's beautiful," Clara whispered, throat tight. Later, when the household settled into a gentle hum, some talking quietly, others drowsing by the fire, Clara stood near the hearth, staring into the flames. The warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. She had not realized how cold she'd been until now. Ethan joined her, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one without ceremony. "You look like you're thinking hard," he said. "I was just remembering," she replied, "and realizing how long it's been since I felt this." "Felt what?" "Welcome," she said simply. He nodded, gaze fixed on the fire. "This place can feel mighty empty, even when it's full." She glanced at him. "You've built something incredible here." "Built it, yes," he said. "Lived in it, not so much." The crackle of the fire filled the space between them. "My parents died within a year of each other," he went on. "I was young but old enough to inherit everything. Thought responsibility would be enough to fill the quiet." "And was it?" Clara asked softly. Ethan's mouth curved in a wry smile. "No!" She understood that answer too well. "I don't have anyone," she said after a moment. "Not anymore. I don't even have a place that feels like it's mine. Just borrowed rooms and borrowed time." Ethan turned to face her fully then. His expression was open, serious. "Then stay," he said. She blinked. "Stay here, not just tonight, not just Christmas." He gestured around them. "This house has room. The land has room. And the children who come and go here could use someone like you." Her heart pounded. "Ethan, I can't." "I'm not asking out of kindness," he said quietly. "I'm asking because this place needs you, and because I think I do too." The words settled between them, heavy and gentle all at once. "You'd give me your entire household?" she asked, barely breathing. "I already have money," he said. "I already have land. None of it means much without someone to share it with." Tears blurred her vision. She laughed weakly. "I came here for dinner." "And you got it," he replied. "Everything else is just an offer." Outside, bells rang in the distance, marking midnight. Christmas had arrived. Clara looked around one last time, at the fire, the tree, the people who had unknowingly stitched a tear in her heart. She thought of the schoolhouse, of the children she loved, of how easily her life could grow from this place. She held out her hand. Ethan took it, his grip warm and certain. "I'd like to stay," she said. His smile was slow and full, the kind that reached his eyes. "Then welcome home." The fire burned steady as the snow fell on the roof, and for the first time in her life, Clara did not dread the morning. She looked forward to it. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe. For more soul-warming stories,